Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about ideas and current events. We explore the underlying connections and root causes that help us discover what is really true, because we believe thinking clearly will reshape the focus of our lives. Today we're going to talk about the pathology of political activists, how AI is going to bring in the end of the world, and maybe do a little update on the Trinity School and some books we're reading, some podcasts we're listening to. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good.
I was just switching around my on-ramp. I was going to have a further insight on "Blessed are those who mourn." But I thought, if you're trying to be upbeat and optimistic in your opening read, I thought I better not start out with "Blessed are those who mourn." Oh. So I moved it down to something I've been thinking about.
Okay.
I moved my AI comment up for the on-ramp. But you got an on-ramp. What's going on at the Trinity School?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I have a small school that I have been trying to do experiments in how to do education, rethinking all of it, right? So we do some things like year-round school. We've gotten rid of grades, like grade levels, and also grades, letter grades. And instead, they progress through when they've accomplished when they've achieved proficiency, is how we would say it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things...
That's a little bit happening, right? In public schools, they're moving towards a proficiency.
Some schools do proficiency model,
that
but they're still locked into the grade level communication style, right? When you do it this way...
What do you mean by locked into grade level?
You need a report card. A parent wants a report card that gives a letter grade that says that my kid is getting a C, right?
Yeah.
Or a B or an A.
Right.
What I do with it is you can't get a C, because if you're at a C performance level, you're not done.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And we use a little bit of technology, and because we're really small, it allows kids to be wherever they need to be. I don't need to say, well, the class has got to move on, which is what I would do when I was a public school teacher.
Right.
Because each of them is working independently.
Yeah.
So the cool new thing we're doing, though, we've got only high school students right now. We are hoping a couple middle schoolers will join us, but with these high schoolers thinking about, my oldest son is 17, and this is his senior year, supposedly, though we don't, we're not worried that way.
The year that you don't recognize.
Yeah, but it is his last year, and thinking about what does he want to do after, and what's the value of college when we look back on it versus what it is now. And the idea that sparked in my head was helping these kids build businesses so that if they're taking a stand in the public domain on political, social, religious concepts that are going to make getting a job difficult, right? Well, they know how to build their own business. They know how to develop something. So my youngest son is a little entrepreneur of his own, and he has some clients that he mows their lawn. So we all talked about what if we did, home maintenance and made it a school business. The kids would get paid to go to school, and it would also pay for their tuition, which the families would really appreciate. Mm-hmm. And then with the hope being that when they graduate, even if they, at the least they have a skill set they wouldn't have had, because high school is usually not practical, nor is college. Mm-hmm. But at most or at best, they could walk out ready to be a manager of a crew or even a business owner of their own. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to just be like a sole proprietor where like anybody can get a pressure washer and go door to door, right? Mm-hmm. And if the worst came to worst, you can make some money doing that. Mm-hmm. But learning how to do online marketing, learning how to manage and give evaluation, right, to other employees. These are all business lessons that most people learn the hard way. And what if you could learn them in school with your peers, with guidance from me that would allow them to be way ahead?
Even a P&L sheet. And
Yeah.
When I was in high school, have you ever heard of junior achievement?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We did that for a year. It was excellent.
Yeah. So that's what's new. We'll see. I've got a couple new students joining in. The biggest struggle we've had is parents want better options, but tuition's tough. Mm-hmm. It's not cheap to pay for
any parents
school.
Doing that is double paying, basically. From their taxes, they're paying for the public school they don't attend anymore. Now they're having to dip a second time into their own pocket.
Right. So. And more states than ever now are doing kind of a voucher program, right? Mm-hmm. Where you homeschool your kids, you get... Oregon has a tiny bit of this with like the Fossil Charter School program. Yeah. But you get up to $1,500 reimbursement for educational activities. Right. What like Arizona, I have friends in Arizona do is they get a check for $7,000 per kid that they can keep if they're doing private school. They still have to account for how it's spent.
Sure.
But that's a huge amount.
It is big.
Right? You got,
But
my
it's
friends
like
have 4
federally,
kids.
It's $12,000, right? That's what the school gets. Federally is around 12,000 per kid.
No, what do you mean federally?
So if your kid is in Salem High School,
Yeah.
from a federal and state combined
Okay.
payment, I believe the school gets about 12,000.
That might be true. I've heard different estimates. You know, it's state specific, but most education funding is from the state level. So the federal
But does
government
it come from the federal to the state?
no. So the federal gives about between 5 and 10% of most districts' budget, and it has to be it's through grants, and so it has to be accounted for and reported.
Okay, so it's all state funds.
So it's almost. I mean, education is each state's largest expenditure.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is funny because, so let's just say it's 12, Arizona, I don't know what Arizona is, but so you have a charter school kid family. You would think just from a financial basis, oh, we're making $5,000 for doing nothing.
Yeah.
But that's not a win in the state's eyes because they lost the client.
Because it's the $7,000 you didn't get.
Well, not even just the $7,000, they lost the kid to change the kid.
Well, there is definitely that because even the most radical teacher, I would say every teacher is in it to impact kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're going to have that impact based on their own moral frame, which sometimes is not in agreement with how we do it.
Right.
But the other side too is that, I mean, that's a function we have now. So in Oregon, if, for example, there's a charter school here in our town that is an online school managed and run by a national online charter school program, and they have 3,000 students in Oregon. Well, our town is less than 1,000 people.
Right.
There's 650 kids that go to our brick and mortar schools, but 3,000 Oregon kids go to that online charter school that's supposedly here in Scio. And there's some small office management done here, but for the most part, it's offsite. And so the advantage to the local district is that they get a cut of every student that goes to that online charter school goes to the normal school district with whom they've established a charter. So there's sometimes a little bit of a competition among districts of who's going to get these big online programs. And they have to provide a few employees to manage some of the documentation, especially around disability. But for the most part, they just get a check. Right? Our local district gets a check every year.
So we'll house you. Come on over here.
That's right. That's right. But what they're afraid of with the Arizona plan is all these parents who say, I don't want to send my kid to the public school, but I can't afford private. Maybe there's not a good charter school available. You know, if it's online charter school, it's still, you have to manage your kid at home. You're basically homeschooling them, but you get a lot of support. And so that would rob from the private or the public schools now. It would basically create a competition that they don't want. And so they try to impugn. I've had conversations with a lot of public educators, and they say, well, these for-profit businesses are corrupt, right? Because they're trying to make money and we're not, which is silly. But also, they are afraid that the competition will drain out, it'll drain out the most engaged and motivated parents who volunteer, who donate, who support. And they'll run off, and all you have left is the parents who don't care. But in the states where we've actually implemented this stuff, what you find is that that's not the case. What you find is more parents get engaged, more parents get motivated, and because there's now a competition, everybody raises their game.
Which is a funny thing, funny way you just told the story. You basically defended that it won't kill the school system.
Correct.
And yet the ones that are leaving, really, in a sense, they're saying this needs to be killed.
Well,
this is not working. That's why I'm taking my kid and I want to educate him differently because this is broken.
Correct. Yeah.
So in order to get the funding,
but you can't fix what's broken.
Passable,
what happens with the competition is that because the reason the public school educators who are activists, especially around the religious social issues like gender theory, critical gender theory, their problem is they think that no one can speak back, no one can talk back to them. What are you going to do about it, right? Nothing. And so all they have to worry about are the politicians. And if their union pays off the politicians, they've got a free and clear.
It's a lot harder to pay off parents.
So I don't want like I have friends in the public education. I don't want them out of a job. I don't want that system destroyed. I want it improved through the competitive process.
Yeah. Yeah. For a long time, I've thought, and I'm not sure I would think differently now, but I'd have to think about it. I think it was a mistake, our country making public education, the whole development of public education, that no, it was not supposed to be a government initiated thing, pooling
Right.
resources. National defense, understandable.
Right.
Public education, no. I like the time when everybody felt like our children are my responsibility.
Right.
And with my local community, if I want to collaborate and we'll together hire a teacher or teachers and to train them, then we're free to do so.
Do you think if a state now said we're gonna follow your lead and we're not gonna have public education in our state, I don't think the Supreme Court would uphold it. I think that it would be required.
It would be illegal federally right now. Yeah.
Okay. But why do you say that? Because my understanding is the Fed can't mandate anything in education. So all of their stuff is grants. So when the federal government tries to influence how educators work, they say, we'll take our money if you don't do it. But they can't actually mandate it because it's not in the Constitution.
But isn't it required to provide public education?
That's what I don't know. But I don't know
And
that
I thought it was
even
like
if it wasn't
1912 or 1895 or something like that, some law is passed. I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing with the voucher system is that you're putting it back
In a
into
sense,
parents'
it's
hands.
dissolving it. Yeah, I agree.
And then the battle becomes, well, what are the requirements that you put on that money, right? So, for example, when I was starting my school, I had a district in Oregon whose superintendent offered me charter school status because he wanted my kids enrolled in his district. He'd get that cut, right? Just like I was saying.
Right.
But what would be required is all of the mandated secularist, leftist talking points would still be required. I would have to say I was teaching knowing I wouldn't.
Yes.
And I wasn't willing to do
the
that.
dilemma in California for the homeschooling movement that we were part of for a season. They were very critical of the charter school movement because they said this is cutting the legs out from under us. Let's say a family wants to teach a 7-day creation theory of Genesis. And in order to do that, they would be in violation because their science curricula would not match, because they'd basically still be under the federal program and they'd be required to teach differently.
Right.
So that their curricula is still under control once they take the funds. So it was a hot debate.
What's interesting, because in my experience, having had conversations with state officials and charter schools leaders, we sat down because I was the federal programs director for our district. And so I was in charge of implementing the federal requirements for receiving funds. And the state of Oregon came to oversee and inspect progress toward those goals. So when we sat down with the charter school leaders of one of the small charter schools here in town, she just said, "Oh, we're not going to do that." And they're like, "Well, it's required." And she says, "Yeah, we're not going to." And she just stared them down, and then they backed down.
Yeah.
Because they don't actually, they say, well, you could lose funding, and all the school boards cower in fear, but they don't actually do it. And because if they do, they know it'd be hit the news everywhere, and it'd be a big thing, and who's going to decide what these schools make. But so what I think is the real issue with charter schools is that if you're charter, your teachers aren't union. And so you don't have to negotiate the way that a public school has to. I mean, almost every district, I think there's 2 districts in Oregon that don't have a union. But they still get paid competitively with all the other districts because otherwise they would unionize if they're not careful, right?
Yeah.
But it gives the administrators a huge amount of freedom.
Yeah.
And so when the charter schools don't have that, it's dues that the unions don't get.
Yeah.
And the unions are very political.
Yeah.
So
This is the battle that Hillsdale's been fighting in terms of not taking federal funds to their hurt even. And their point is the proverb, when you sit at the king's table, hold a knife to your throat. Right? Because when you eat the king's food, you do the king's will.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, my on-ramp.
Yeah.
Here's an on-ramp. Why AI, I'm gonna pull that one from a later short take. But why AI won't win. So, there's all this stuff, and there's the Chat GPT stuff and AI, and
Yeah. It won't
there's
win what?
warnings. It won't win world domination.
Oh, okay.
And here's why. Because it is no different than what currently is.
So the AI can only do what the programmers tell it to do.
That's right.
Okay.
But it can AI can make a monolithic, a same thought process online. But and here's the dilemma. I just read a fantastic argument by Matt Taibbi. I said it right?
Yeah.
Matt Taibbi. There
Matt
we go.
Taibbi.
And it was on the censorship model, and he was just in Great Britain with Russell Brand and Schallenberger. And as if Russell Brand is on the right, and he's not.
Yeah.
But he is for free speech. And so all of a sudden they're allies, the right and the left free speechers.
Liberals.
Right? Liberals.
Liberals are
Old
pro free
liberals.
speech. Yeah.
And even progressive, because I would say Russell Brand is a very progressive liberal as well. But he's for free speech.
Yeah.
And so here he is making common cause with what are traditional conservatives. And Taibbi was talking about this is because the goal of AI and the goal of online and corporate media structures is to control thought.
Yeah.
And
he says induce conformity.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he said they're succeeding. It's working.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of articles like that and whatnot. But I've been thinking, I've had this thought several times. Actually, it won't really work. And here's why.
Okay.
Because of Christianity. Here's what Christianity does to people. Nobody becomes, well, at least this is my theological belief, nobody becomes a Christian willingly. They are changed internally. They come to a crisis point. You can take the prodigal son story.
Yeah.
He's willing to lose all his friends. He's willing to lose all his money. He still doesn't want to return home. He's willing to endure a famine. He still won't return home. He's willing to go take work on a farm.
Yeah.
And the worst is, it's with pigs, which he grew up
Unclean.
unclean. It's anathema to him. And he's willing to debase himself entirely. And it isn't until he's sharing food and he says he comes to his senses and he repents and turns.
Okay.
What I think is in the backdrop of that is I think God is doing something to open his eyes and he returns home. All right. So anyway, theologically, that's what I think. So what that ends up meaning is you believe the lies fundamentally as a person until God opens your eyes to see what's true.
Right.
So, and then you can't not see what's true. You can still have deceit or blindness and capture you, but you are fundamentally a person who sees what's true now. And that is going to make it so that nobody can ever tell you to believe something. Now, you could be fooled on this or that.
You can deceive yourself.
You can deceive yourself. You can be deceived by someone else.
Right.
But fundamentally, a Christian is a person who believes what's true. And
So where does that fight with AI?
Well, AI's fundamental point in terms of the control of the world opinion aspect. There may be some other aspects that I'm not addressing those. But to believe, to distort reality will end up being the same failure that the whole spirits already distort reality in the world. It's not, in other words, it's no different. So it says in Ephesians that the God of this world has blinded the eyes.
Yeah.
Right? How is AI going to do anything more?
Well,
It's just another aspect of blinding the eyes.
the fear. So you're saying the fear of AI is that it will be used as a more effective tool for manipulation,
A human tool, yes.
right? But that as people who have the Spirit of God in them and speaking, we will resist it.
We won't be able to not resist it just by the nature, by the Spirit of God being a truth. The truth will set you free.
Right.
You have experienced this in this colossal soul realm. It will trickle out into other realms. It can't be stopped.
Right.
And so what will happen? What would happen is Christians start becoming, they might get killed for it.
Right.
But they become suspicious. They become conspiratorial. They don't believe just because it says it online. And their neighbor says, well, it says right here. And the Christian says, and to themselves, let's say at first, I used to believe such and such until God opened my eyes. So that argument doesn't win for me.
Well,
so
and
what that it says it right there.
I think one of the social changes in the last 3 years after COVID and the George Floyd riots and all that was more and more people realizing that they were being manipulated.
I agree.
And so I think you're right. I was hearing a business guy yesterday talk about spam emails. He's a marketing guy, Seth Godin, and he was talking about how, salespeople who are just hustling. They're just trying to get their sales, right? And if you hustle, you can make it.
Yeah.
But he said, there's no amount of hustle you'll be able to do. There's no amount of spam emails you can send to potential clients that can't be outdone by AI, right? Because what AI is doing, the machine learning, is saying, well, the more data you give it, the smarter it'll get about how to do anything that you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. But all of it in the end is a persuasion, and if not simple persuasion, then manipulation. Mm-hmm. And so we are, I think, waking up to that and saying, well, anytime someone uses persuasive techniques that are fear-based, right, that are flattery-based, that create in you this sense of I'm not okay unless, right? I'm not okay unless, things are not okay unless.
Yeah, yeah.
That we if we're wise, just say no.
Yeah.
But the problem is we've got people on all sides of every debate using these techniques.
Yeah.
Because the techniques now are standard, like how do you become an influencer, right?
Yeah.
There's tutorials by the dozen about how to get online.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many articles I open up and click on some point. I just read one from the New York Post that normally, traditionally, they were the ones who exposed the laptop from Hunter Biden.
And they're kind of a semi-tabloid, is that right?
A tabloid, but conservative. And they, the New York Post, not the New York Sun. There's a couple.
Right.
Anyway, the New York Post, and they had this article about the election. Trump is right, just not in the way he thinks. And so they had this phrase, the widely debunked conspiracy theory about the 2020 election being stolen by voter machines and ballots. And then they go on to make their other point, right? But just the widely debunked, that's a truth-based manipulation.
Right.
It's designed to make me feel like, Mike, oh, well, if I think it was stolen, I'm going against the widely debunked idea. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, who wants to believe in something that's been widely debunked?
Yeah,
right?
You don't want to be that guy.
You don't want to be that guy. And so that's that persuasion, and I think shame is a part of that and whatnot, and being on the inside and in the know. But the reality is that these things is what I think is so funny about for the Durham report. He was called before Congress. All these things that conservatives have known for some time, and they've been labeled conspiracy theorists, they're all coming to light. Every single one of them. Now, they may not be covered. The mainstream media is not covering, but more and more outlets cover them. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if you really can't stop truth.
Right.
You might, for a season, cover it up, bury it under 6 feet under.
Right.
But you really can't stop it. And that's why I think AI fundamentally will not do what we're being fear-mongered and told, that it's the devastating, crippling government conspiracy manipulation. And I think it can have some effectiveness, but I don't actually think it will win.
That reminds me, I was thinking of when I was debating a lot more online during 2020, right? 2020 and 2021, I was in a lot of Facebook debates with the goal being of persuading those who read along, right? When you're in that kind of debate, it was all with people I knew, but even then it would sometimes get personal.
Yeah.
And frustrating, and you have to manage all that as you go through it. But my goal was never to persuade the person with whom I'm debating, but the 100 people that are reading along.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found myself doing is really studying logical fallacies, so that I could call and say, "Wow, that's a Mott and Bailey," or "That's that's an argument from authority. That's a no true Scotsman." Like I learned all these things to be able to call them out, because what these fallacies are is their manipulation tactics. You won't be one of us if you don't agree. All experts agree, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think what you're describing is we need to encourage others and help them become resistant to manipulation.
Yes, that's right.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
it reminds me of
Not afraid to it. Let
Yeah.
the radar they've been given by God, we'll call it the Holy Spirit, for truth. Let that be something they're pleased with and are willing to, and know that it will have some conflict.
right.
It's okay. And you're free to say, I just don't agree with that.
Well, and I've found myself being able to do it by identifying in pundits, right? I listen to podcasts and things, and I think, oh, this guy's just creating a self-righteous, superiority argument.
Yeah.
I agree with him, but the way he's doing it is not clean.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and he's trying to manipulate his audience.
Yeah.
And I give him a few chances, and then I'm done with them.
Yeah.
But it is hard to find someone who doesn't do that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's the tactic of the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even the right does similar things.
Well, I'm only talking about right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some people on the right that I don't enjoy listening to them now because I feel like they're using the same methodology and it's not appropriate.
Well, and
It's
what I
not
want,
helpful.
what I want, and I want to get better at too, is saying, not just what do we want to resist, not just what are the tactics we say no to, but what are our tactics to influence and persuade that are not flattery, they're not fear-based, they're not totalitarian in nature, they're not manipulative or corrupt. They're declaring righteousness, they're inviting people to wholesomeness. It's building culture instead of just resisting it, right? We were talking beforehand about the tree. You know, if you've got a bad tree that bears bad fruit, you can pluck all the fruit, but they're coming back next year.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to plant your own trees. You got to build your own cultural systems.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so what I want to do is get more practical and say, okay, like I was thinking about this. I went to a Republican meeting the other day, and I do these occasionally. Maybe I should do it more just to have a little influence over the local Republicans. But what I find in these meetings, it's like a city council meeting. It's like, okay, here's the minutes. You know, this guy's going to give his report. Here's how it went at the parade when we had a booth. You know, and it's who's volunteering, who needs this, who needs that. But it feels like we should be sitting down having a tactical meeting, saying, how are we going to have influence? And somebody giving remember, this is why we're here, and each one of you, here's your mission, and then send out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that you don't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm against those people," which is a moral superiority frame that gets you a good feeling,
It's backslapping,
but
with your
encourages you to do
neighbor.
nothing.
Yes,
right?
I agree completely.
But instead to say, "Okay, each one of you, in the political parties, they have something called a PCP, and those of you who are listening, I encourage you to become one. It's you get to become a representative for your party, like a voting member of the Republicans." So that when the Republicans gather and they elect their leadership or they make decisions, only the voting members have influence. And so if you want to shift how your local party is going, you have to be a voting member. And you just have to get yourself on the ballot, and you get 3 people vote for you, you're in. Because there's a massive shortage of PCPs. And so I was mowing the lawn yesterday thinking, well, what if instead of us all thinking, I wish our party or I wish the leaders or the state or the federal would do this or that, right? Because we love to Republicans love to complain about Republicans. What if instead we said, what if every local PCP member made it a point to get 5 people to vote who wouldn't have voted? And there's 150 of us, and let that influence grow just in our county. Things like that are really practical. That's the stuff I think has that culture building impact.
Yeah. All right. Talk to me about pathology of leftism and the police.
Okay. Well, there's something called the dark tetrad.
The dark
tetrad is a
tetrad.
It's sort of a recent
For
psychological understanding of personality.
okay.
So there's a ton of personality tests out there, right? And everybody has their favorites. I don't know if everybody does. A lot of people do. But most of them are someone's intuitive sense of people. That when you say, oh, like you're this and you're in this category, and let me describe what that is, and then maybe you think, yeah, that does describe me. You feel understood, and you create this emotional bond with this system of explaining personality.
Yeah.
But none of that is scientific, right? And so among psychoanalysts, there's one main system of personality that is actually research supported with data and even some genetic components identified. And it's called the Big Five.
The Big Five. I've never even
The
heard
Big
of it.
Five personality system. And it has an acronym to help you remember, OCEAN. And it's openness to new ideas, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So neuroticism is just your tendency to worry, right? Or to experience negative emotions generally, because most negative emotions originate with fear and then either branch into sadness or anger. And so what they're showing, though, is that there's actually maybe a sixth component, which is this dark tetrad, and it's the tendency toward narcissism, sadism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, which is that manipulative tendency we're talking about, which people
justify the ends. That's essentially Machiavellian.
So what research is finding right now is that people who exhibit high levels of this dark tetrad are incredibly drawn to authoritarian political schemes because they see it as a method for manipulating their way into positions of power over others. And the big authoritarian scheme of the moment is leftism, right? The leftists want to tear down society and build it in their image. And so what we're seeing is, and you see this in not just leftism, you know, I watch these, you know, car chase videos you ever watch, or like police encounter videos. Yeah. It's sort of this like, it's like when you're driving down the road and you see a car accident and you just really want to watch what happened, see what happened. Police videos are the same. One of the things you'll find, and this is where the Black Lives Matter movement is not wrong, is that if you were drawn to this, if you had a dark tetrad, a high level of that kind of narcissistic, Machiavellian sadism in you, becoming a police officer might have a certain appeal.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Because you get a large leeway to be able to use violence against people and control them.
Yeah.
And so, what's happening though in our political world is, and this comes back to the AI conversation too, is that as one side uses it, the other side says, "Well, we got to use it too. It's the new rules to the new game, right?" But it's a form of corruption that we're all now sort of accepting, this manipulative domination that, from a biblical perspective, is evil, right? I mean, I would even call it a form of witchcraft, where you're using power that's not from God to try to gain control over others, right? And we know that the Spirit of God is never that way. The goal of God is loving submission, not domination and fear. Yeah. So I was just thinking about it. I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So by identifying it that way, you're trying to explore what has brought about the shift left. And you're saying maybe there's some elements that there's some things that draw people, these dark things that draw certain kinds of people. Yeah. But what it also presumes is an evacuation of old terms. So, for example, that there's right and wrong, and what that means.
Right.
Because there's a reason they're called dark, right? So the tetrad that you're talking about, if it was written today, starting over, maybe they wouldn't call it dark, right? But maybe
it's a recent experiment. So even psychologists
why call it dark if those are being
because it's
supported.
accepted that they're corrupt.
Yes. Yeah. So, but you just talked about, for example, the same dynamic could make one become a criminal and another become a cop because of the role of power.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, not a criminal. I mean, certainly there's a criminal aspect, right? So psychopathy is basically a criminal tendency toward egotistical. I wrote it down. Antisocial personality disorder. Right.
Yeah.
But what's happening is you're always going to have a percent of the population that has criminal tendencies, right? That are out to get their own. Those people usually are grifters. Like they can't stay in one place very long, no matter how persuasive or charming they are. People catch on, and then they're excluded from social groups. And so what happens is they're drawn to these political, right? Like you'll see a high number of former rapists and child molesters and criminals who will glom onto these street protests because in that riot atmosphere, they can do the dark things they've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean that the political atmosphere is corrupt necessarily. It just means that you're going to have these corrupt people. You see it now with the trans thing, where like, okay, maybe there's people who genuinely are struggling with their identity around their sexual, male, female. But if someone's a creepy rapist And all they have to say is, "Oh, I'm a woman now," and they get put in the women's prison. Well, hey, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
It draws those people in.
Right. Right.
And so the reason society has boundaries, the reason they might hold police or politicians to a higher standard, is because it has that danger built into it.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we sort of accepted instead a lower standard. We said, well, all the politicians are liars. What are you going to do? Right? Like, oh, the police, they're kind of, what are you going to do? And then we sit back with a moral superiority and do nothing.
Yeah, I just picked up last night. We watched an episode of a show we had forgotten that we'd not finished. But anyway, it's based on this undercover group of people, undercover agents, involved with 2 rival gangs that are drugs and violence and whatnot. And what's interesting about it, and this is the premise for a lot of shows like this, these undercover agents, well, let's just say they're DEA, but these ones happen to be FBI, and DEA is kind of a mix.
Right.
They're actually really share the similarities of the same drug lords they're battling.
Correct.
They're
Yeah.
the same kinds of people. One of them is doing it for a violation of U.S. law, and the other is, or societal corruption, whatever you want to call it. The other is doing it on the side of U.S. law, but they use the same methodologies.
Right.
They have the same perspectives on life. They have the same attitudes, and it's almost has the sense of being, a coin toss, as if they could have flipped roles.
Right.
The drug lord could have been a DEA agent wielding all the same power and able to pull a gun and able to be around drugs and the women and the partying, but he chose that side and the other guy chose the other side. But they're really,
Well, it sounds like what you're describing is war.
yeah, it is
Right.
like
In a war, you do terrible things.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
even in that, you have to set a boundary and say, well, I'll go this far, but no farther.
And that's the.
But what do you
Yeah.
do when your enemy has no boundary?
I know.
Because it's going to give them an advantage.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, whether it's in a political or a legitimately violent endeavor, you are entrusting your cause to God,
Yeah.
right? That providence will
Yes.
favor us because we refuse to become corruptive in the
And do
same
what's right.
methodology.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
Even if we claim it's for
I read a
good.
very interesting article, just by the way, really quickly, American Greatness, great articles. But this guy was talking about the Ukraine. So what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and there's a lot of things happening like right now that are interesting. But one of his points is that NATO and another the U.S. has armed and funded Ukraine, right?
Yep.
But have done so in their image as aggressors, and therefore has pushed the Ukraine out of a defensive posture and into an offensive posture, and they're losing that. And the guy is saying
They're losing that. What do you mean?
they're losing the war as an with an offensive posture. And what he's suggesting is, and he's trying to take it back, what can we learn about war? He basically says that the last offensive war that was won was World War II. Every offensive attempt at war has been lost. The defense has won in every war since World War II.
In every war since World War II.
Since World War
Okay.
II.
Yeah.
Korea, the defense, it was a draw in Korea.
right.
In Vietnam, Afghanistan, 3 times Afghanistan if you count the most recent one. But basically his point is saying with the upped technological components of war, an offensive win is very difficult. It's difficult to win going on offense. It's easier to win being on defense.
How much of that is because our wars since World War II aren't political in nature, or they are political and social in nature? In other words, we're going to go to war because of this ideology, whether it's communism or terrorism, right? I guess terrorism isn't an ideology, but it's radical Islam.
I mean, I agree with that point.
And so
but
war's not
does
going to
that-
win that.
Well, wait a minute though. In what way is World War II not the same?
Well, because World War II is to stop the Nazi machine, not to defeat Nazism. Whereas there's no necessary machine behind communism or radical Islam. It's an ideology.
Well,
And so you can
I would
stop.
say you could say the same thing for North
You can
Korea
stop the
and South
Taliban.
Korea. The Korean War, you might say it's ideology, and I would agree, but it was the North being taken over and wanted to take over the whole peninsula.
Well,
And we said,
let's
"No,
use Vietnam as an example, right? The U.S. easily beat the Vietnamese until the Paris Accords, but then there was a changeover of political atmosphere in the U.S. and they basically backed out and created this long, drawn-out conflict where it was over, and the Viet Cong had surrendered and made peace. But when the U.S. Congress changed hands, then they said, well, we don't want to take over, and they backed off. And it created this quagmire because we lost track of what the original target was, is you destroy the machine. The machine being the military political party and organization, institution that has created this oppression. And that's the job of the military, right? The army, the U.S. military invading Iraq in the early 90s, immediately victorious within days, right? Even in 2003, shock and awe, we went in, right? And we beat the machine. And then we decided, now we're going to try to institute democracy. And so now you get 20 years of quagmire because now we're not trying to beat a machine, which is the military. That's what they're good at. We're trying to defeat an ideology, and you can't do it. A war machine cannot defeat an ideology.
It's interesting. I have to think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, another persecution of smartphones.
Okay. Yeah. What's up with that?
Oh, I was just thinking about this. It just feels like we are on a pathway. The AI stuff, the censorship stuff. We are on a pathway of those who stand for what is true and want to stand for that. There's persecution is growing. We'll just say it that way. It's growing around the world.
Okay.
Statistically.
Yeah.
Towards Christianity. I'm not sure how it's functioning right now in Canada, but it's currently a hate crime. If you say homosexuality is a moral sin,
Yeah.
you can be put in prison in Canada.
Well, not only that, we were talking about teachers being required to affirm transgender ideology in order to get hired.
That's right.
And so now if any Christian who's going to stand on principle is now not
In
an
California, they are in the process of passing a bill that says, as a parent, if you don't affirm your child's gender dysphoria,
Yeah.
the state can take your child away from you.
Right.
Right? So this is flat out persecution.
Well, this is something similar in Washington. In Oregon, I've heard from multiple families, from the parents' perspective and kids, that they were transitioning and accessing testosterone as a young girl without the parents' knowledge.
Yeah.
Even using either the parents' insurance through the school.
Yeah.
And the school's facilitating medical transitions.
The school will sign them up for the Oregon health plan stuff without even telling the parents.
Correct. Yeah, because at 15, kids are independent, medically independent.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay,
the point is, though, that persecution. So what's the response to persecution? There's a lot of stages, I think. But at some point, it's hiding. At some point, that's where it's always hiding.
At some point, Christians go into hiding. Is that what you're saying?
Go into hiding.
Yeah,
that's right. But technology today is anti-hiding. It's very difficult to hide.
Sure.
And I was just thinking about smartphones themselves. I mean, you can't. The data. It's humorous, but the January 6th stuff, a lot has been smartphone based, and they've tracked people and said you were here, based upon the information they got. And then that same thing happened. Did you ever end up seeing the 2,000 Mules?
I never did. I feel like I heard enough about it.
Yeah, but that's what they did. They tracked cell phone, open information on cell phone.
You can just buy the data.
They bought the data,
Yeah.
they crunched it, and they found all these people running routes,
Yeah.
right? And so I mean, that's the example is easy in this, like, well, Christians will just leave their cell phones at home. But the example is just an example to illustrate. The technology is such that how do you hide? If there's persecution, how do you hide?
Right.
And I'm not sure it's going to be so easy. When we think of persecution, we think of Roman days, right?
Yeah.
And the catacombs, or maybe the underground church in China. But all of our illustrations are pre-technology.
Yeah, but if the underground church can function in China today,
If they've
got
doing it
10
today,
yeah, which they are.
I'm not sure if
China
they
has
are the
10 times the
same-
surveillance we have.
They do, but I'm not sure that the underground church is the same it was in the 80s, say. I think they are more out in the open than they used to be.
So they're not in need of that kind of hiding.
I just don't know. I don't hear about it. or read about it in the same way that they are hidden meetings. And I'm not saying that they don't happen, but
Right.
I was just thinking about it. What, persecution, what's that look like in a technology era?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, what's strange about that in my head is you immediately begin to say, well, what are the tactics used by terrorists today? And how are Christians going to have to adopt those tactics? Do you know what I'm saying?
What's an example?
Well, like buying these throwaway phones, using them
burner.
briefly and throw them away, or creating a shared, like you and I both have access to the same Gmail account. Instead of sending emails, we write a draft. Then I log into the same account and read the draft, and now we've messaged without it going through the internet. Well, now that's how terrorists did it. Now that's all getting scanned too, right? Because they're onto it. But there are these techniques that get developed, and you just basically become strategic in your communication. Right. But the thing is, if you're a Christian in hiding, all you have to do is feed your family, right? You have a place to live. You can survive. The people that they're going to go after are the people who are saying, no, let's organize and activate people to resist. Those are the people who have to create and discover these tactics.
I mean, I agree with you from that.
It's the church leaders,
aim.
right?
I agree with that. At the same time, why it seems the state wants to stomp out, and this is the whole thing.
I guess it'd be gatherings. That's the weak point for Christians is they keep getting together.
Yeah,
right. If everybody stayed home, it'd be fine.
And when they get together, they talk and they share ideas.
And that's what the danger, because getting together is where the ideas get spread. And that's what the totalitarian state hates.
They're gossip the gospel, and so they're going to
gossip the gospel.
Yeah, to their neighbors. They're going to still share.
Yeah.
Because they feel called by Jesus to be in hiding to protect their lives and their family.
Yeah.
But they're still going to share, and they're going to have their radar up. Is this person a plant, or is this person really interested? I see them hurt. I do a kind thing for them, and I'm going to share the gospel with them at some point, which is going to be banned and outlawed speech, right? Because it says you're wrong, you're sinful, and you have to repent. And, well, what kind of sins? Well, the lifestyle you're living.
Right.
Right?
The sexual perversion,
can't say that.
Corruption, yeah.
Well, so then they risk being thrown in jail, but they're not going to stop doing that.
Yeah, right.
They're going to try to be discerning about, is this a genuine person that's asking this, or is this a government plant?
Right.
Because then I was thinking also about the portion of the church that will be, and maybe you would be a part of this, I'm not sure, would be inclined towards military
militant resistance. We're gonna have to go watch The Mission here. Jeremy Irons and Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Who we're gonna fight? Or are we gonna? Yeah. I don't know if I would be inclined, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not as I would never be inclined to violence as a Christian, but I'm open to it as an American. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
That distinction's a very important one.
Yeah.
And then there's the difference between violence. Would I do violence versus would I be a part of a collaborative, coordinated, strategic process, right? Would I meet? But then I thought to myself, you know what? The problem with all of that is the government's ability to infiltrate is way superior than any militia group, we'll call them, Christian or not Christian.
Well, that's because
they can't infiltrate the government.
The way they infiltrate, well, that's how they've taken over. It's the long march of the institutions.
No, the right can't go infiltrate.
Well, not without lying.
Yeah.
Right?
We can't do it the same way.
Yeah.
They can. So they can send people to be Proud Boy members and whatnot.
But so let me ask you this, right? This is the spy missionary dichotomy.
Yes.
The spies entering the promised land, if they had been asked, hey, are you guys Jews? They would have been like, oh, no.
I
right?
know.
So I think there is a purpose and a role for that in God's service.
But you have to still
But you can't long-term live your life under a lie. It tears you down.
And that would only be a segment of Christians who would embrace what you just said. Because another segment would say, but we're not ancient Israel under covenant by God. The war, the national war capacity as a part of ancient Israel is wrapped up in their being, not so in the church. At least that would be the argument. That's where I would find myself. And there'd be a lot of people who'd say, the church is not called to the same thing, Israel. That is not for us. When it says,
well, I'm not talking about the church, though. I'm talking about, so if as an American, you were to resist tyranny, you would still hold yourself to a Christian standard of moral behavior, right? I'm not going to hurt kids, even if those are the kids of my enemy.
Right.
That kind
That's
of thing.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where is there flexibility to say, well, I'm a spy, and here's an example from the Bible of people acting in war
Yeah.
under the power and authority
Yeah.
of the state, even
Yeah.
though it's a state instituted by God,
Yeah.
which ours is not.
Yes.
I mean, it is to the sense that all authority is established by God.
Yes.
Right. But you can still look and say, okay, my moral standard can be influenced and informed by what Israel did or didn't do.
Yeah. Did you watch the Chris Pratt 6-episode thing? I don't remember what it's called now.
The terminal list?
Yeah.
Oh,
that.
yeah, I
Did
watched
you watch
that.
it? What did
Yeah.
you think of it? It's along these lines, right? He's a U.S. citizen. He's a soldier.
Well,
He's a combatant, and he feels free to fight those who have fought against him.
right. It's sort of saying, and this is the question of war. And, if you were a Christian working in the CIA, you're behaving as if there's a war in places where there isn't.
Right.
Right. And what that show is about is saying, well, that war is now here in America. And so I'm going to engage.
He's saying it's not fair to call this vigilantism because he's in the open field of combat as an American citizen.
Well, I think you're playing with terms there, but I think there is a place where vigilantism is not wrong. I think that's the argument they're making. And you can play with the word or not.
Sure.
The problem from a Christian perspective of that show, and I did enjoy it, is that it's just so purely revenge, and it's revenge guised in a moral question of, yeah, I'm also fighting for my country. I'm also fighting for what's right. Because if they can do it to me, they can do it to anybody, right? And I don't. That's not completely wrong, right? I mean, America loves Batman.
I know Batman is it's a worthy on second thought question. Batman.
And is it
Vigilantism.
revenge or
I
is
know.
it a justice?
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I'll repay.
But it also, and this is
William
where
Wallace.
it's the line between government, right? Because government is described in Romans 13 as the mechanism by which God gets his revenge.
Right. So William Wallace, when he's a private citizen, these wrongs are done and he flees and hides.
Yeah.
And one of the points of the story is that it's not until he's not knighted, but he's made a lord or an earl or something. He's granted a part of the estate of the Scottish people at the time.
Right.
And then he feels it's his right and his responsibility to take justice where there is wickedness taking place. And so he goes in the scenes and kills the people that are doing bad because he thinks he's been put in the instituted by God in the authority structures to do it.
And who's that Bible character? Is it Jehu? Is the warrior in the
left-handed warrior? That's Jehu.
who goes and assassinates the corrupt
the
kings?
left-handed.
Yeah, and he's appointed by the prophet to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Dark times, man.
When movies were beautiful.
Wait, I have a question about
All right.
that. My question is, because I've heard this question asked several times, is where's the line? Right, and I think we've talked about this too. Like somebody said, I heard this discussion when I was in college, is why don't more Christians bomb abortion clinics? If abortion is murder, a genocide taking place actively in our country, we would all, I think, say, if we were in Germany during the era of the Nazis, we would engage in violence to resist that tyranny and corruption. So why would we not do so now? And the best answer I've heard is simply that if there are political, peaceful means to resist evil, you do that until there is no more. And when there are no more political and peaceful means, then violence is acceptable. But I feel like we're in this, we can feel our country moving toward that, where the political means are no longer accessible.
I agree.
Right? If
We've already, and that is some of what is legitimately in the January 6th. There was, in a sense, protest. I don't personally believe it was a riot.
Right.
But there was protest. People showed up. This is wrong. It was peaceful.
I was there.
Yeah.
It was a riot.
Okay.
Yeah. It was not an insurrection.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
We'll call
there
it
was no organized attempt to take over the government. Right. But what it was a riot that got manipulated for political reasons.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of video and documentary evidence to support that.
Yeah.
Like understaffing the police who were meant to quell the
intentional
front
things,
lines, instigating infiltrating, all that stuff.
Right.
Anyway, Yeah. So there's January 6 people that are still in prison without trial to this day.
Right. That's right.
If the national elections are,
But a lot of people went because they thought this is a part of the political, and this is a straw. I can't believe we have to go to these lengths to protest this. They're diminishing voice.
right.
My voice is heard less and less
Right.
and less and less. So I'll do more and more and larger things.
Yeah. So part of that too is the side effect of if we are more isolated to only people who agree with us, right? If I only interact with people that I know and who agree with my perspective, you might easily get a false sense that everybody agrees with me, right? Until what's the big reset is elections. So if everybody I know in my area of Oregon thinks that the decriminalizing drugs is a bad idea, I might think, oh, okay, we all agree. And then the election happens and you go, whoa, actually, a ton of people thought the other way. But if elections are no longer in question or no longer reliable,
That's right.
now you have no way to gauge.
That's right.
And so if you have no gauge for popular opinion, then the only thing left, or then people in power don't need to convince 51% anymore.
That's right.
You only need about 30%. Because if 30%,
Enough to make a voice.
well, that 30%, and I'm making that number up, but it could be smaller. That 30% will be a hardy, vocal minority
Right.
who's convinced they are the majority.
That's right. And talk like it.
And everyone else will think, well, maybe they are. Maybe I'm the crazy one.
Yeah.
Because how can you know?
They're the loudest.
Yeah.
And then if you control the precincts and whatnot, then you get your 51%.
Right.
It just isn't by people.
Right.
Well, I was going to say it earlier when you mentioned I go into the Republican meeting and they sit around saying, well, we're against this, this, and this, and they congratulate one another and they don't strategize to do anything. That's exactly the way I feel. Polls, I've not looked at a poll since prior to 2020.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. I don't believe it matters. I don't believe it's accurate. My opinion is that the elections are being stolen currently.
Yeah.
And so what in the world does a poll mean? Trump's up this much. He got a bump for this. DeSantis is this. Larry Elder in this. I don't even look at it anymore. I don't even care because it's meaningless now.
Right.
It has no meaning.
Well, and maybe it always was. Like if you think of the political, like the presidential run right now, none of those polls matter, even the national ones.
Okay.
Because the only thing that matters right now is what is Iowa going to do?
Even if it always was, the national polls were being co-opted, but the internal polls, they still believed in polls.
Right. Yeah.
And it shaped how they ran a campaign because they had to get votes.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. For sure.
I don't believe that's the case anymore. I think polls are now all emptied of content. They're just external.
If that's true, then vigilantism is all that's left, right? If that's true, you practice, you collect your
it's
ammo.
probably not 100% true then.
But what I
It's
see
largely-
is political campaigns still do, at least Republican ones, right? But I also see, and this is in particular in the Democrat side, is a total willingness to not campaign, to not debate, which
In
signals to
certain
me that they
areas-
don't care about public opinion, that they don't think the elections matter.
and they don't need it.
They don't need elections
That's
to matter
right.
if
That's
they can
right.
manipulate them that
But
degree.
what I've noticed is it's only in certain areas. It's only certain races. So my working thesis right now is until theft, interference, election theft is addressed by the right, we will not win the presidency. I don't care who runs, and I don't care who runs on the left. It doesn't matter. We will not win the presidency.
Well, that's why Biden was elected, because it doesn't matter.
That's right. It doesn't matter. And frankly, I think that's why, actually, this is a total side point, but Newsom, I think he wants to be the next president.
Oh, yeah.
But his way to get there, I think, is so clever. He is not declaring. All he's doing is saying he supports Biden. He supports Biden. Biden is so great.
Yeah.
But he's functioning like DeSantis out of his home state. He's
Right.
functioning nationally.
Right.
And you notice who he's battling? Newsom is not battling Trump.
No, he's DeSantis.
He's battling DeSantis.
Right.
It's this undercover presidential battle taking place, but Newsom is not out there because I don't think that's the way. That's not the right process within his party. He wants to be handed it when Biden is too decrepit. He falls and breaks a hip, or he does something.
Yeah.
And they do not want Kamala Harris.
Right.
Right. And so will you come in?
He's the man.
Yeah, he's the man.
And I think what he's doing.
But it's not polling. It's not winning public opinion.
No, I think he's signaling to the state.
That's what I think.
I'll be your man. Look, I'm supporting your man now.
Totally agree.
I'll do what you tell me. Just give me the clout.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So in the presidency, I don't think the right's going to win. I also don't think they're going to win any of the. I don't think we'll win the Senate back. The right. I don't think the right will win the Senate back until this is addressed. Because.
But how can it be addressed if you're not in a position of power?
I think the right has to address it. They have to.
So that's a local
minority,
issue. Each state has to. Is that what you're saying?
That's true, state, but it could be nationally as well. Trump hasn't addressed it. He's not addressed.
He doesn't address anything.
Fraud.
He just talks about things.
He addresses his own loss in 2020 as it was stolen.
Yeah.
But there's no talk of what are we going to do. There was no talk when he was signaling before it was stolen that it was going to be stolen.
Right.
Right. But they didn't do anything.
But he still went along. But that's right. Trump's way, because Trump is not a solver. He's an instigator. And so what he wants to do is say, I'm going to say this is a problem.
Respects, yes.
This is like think of immigration. I'm going to talk and talk and talk about how immigration is a problem, and then bring me a solution. He's not coming with one. He's waiting for it to be brought to him, and then he'll say yes or no.
Right.
He wants to be the decider
CEO in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas DeSantis says, here's the plan. He shows up with the plan. We're going to get it done.
I agree with you. But it's not just Trump. It's Ronna McDonald, not McDaniel.
Ronna McDaniel. Ronald McDonald.
She's not doing anything on that front either. Senate Republicans aren't. House Republicans aren't.
She's part of the machine too.
I agree.
She's the McCain-Romney wing.
But even if you say the senators that are not so and that are being vocal, they're being vocal for other causes. Very, very few, almost nobody nationally. And all they have to do is not all they have to do. Where it has to start is obviously it has to happen at a local level, but the voice, I believe, has to be at a national level. The national Republicans on the right, as a group, and it has to be the majority of their group, and it has to be a cause-oriented voice that says these elections are being stolen and we have to stop this.
Right.
Because, for example, when 2020 happens and Texas brings this lawsuit, is it 31 states, I believe, or maybe 19 states?
Yeah, I don't know.
A large number of states sign onto this lawsuit and says we've been disenfranchised, and the Supreme Court felt so little weight from the right that they said you don't have standing and we don't even have to hear it. They clearly had standing as a state running. They said our whole state, because the Constitution gives the state the right to figure out how it's going to collect its votes to vote for this thing.
Right.
And when they say we couldn't be counted because of this fraud happening, and they have all this evidence, and the Supreme Court says you don't have it was total baloney.
Right.
And I think it was pressure because the right, the leaders in the right, were not going to say this is a real issue.
So here's the only explanation I can see on that, and that as to why would the people on the right, the Republicans, not resist it, and it's because they've got their own machines set up in their states.
That's exactly what it is.
And if you bring that scrutiny, then there's going to be a lot of southern Republican states
the people
that have been running the same game.
In Wisconsin, what Lindell backed the real-time, no latency checking of voter registrations in states. There's a group, Omega something, I don't remember now what it's called. But they're saying that we can check real-time changes, and we can show you the fraud that happened in Arizona. We showed Kerry Lake. The judge didn't care. We did it in Wisconsin, and we got Ron Johnson reelected again because they tried to take it from him. Yeah. But we've gone to Republicans, and they don't want to hear it because they're doing the same thing.
So this is the insidious nature of established
7-Eleven
power.
having 131 voter registrations.
Oh, for that address?
For that address. Or
that's because
they changed 10,000 addresses, the zip code number, so it gets sent out, but gets sent out of the wrong place, and somebody goes and collects all those ballots.
Right.
And then they change it back, and with current technology, they can't see it except for this latency thing that tracks all changes in real time. Anyway, it's really interesting technology, but the point I'm trying to make is they're saying we've gone to Republicans and showed them their voter rolls, and they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, so if you let's say you are in Arizona, and let's assume that there's a machine that runs those elections, right? There's an organized crime essentially that controls
turning
elections.
out to be a very bad place.
Yeah.
John McCain's state is deeply criminal.
Well, but here's the thing. If that's the case, if it's true, which I think it is, but
Yeah.
you know, evidence is difficult. If it's true, then people like McCain only got elected because they said yes to the machine.
That's right. That's
And so
exactly
they're not
right.
going to betray the people who got him there,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
But so the only thing you can do to defeat it then is an overwhelming public sentiment, right? It's the parents showing up at school board meetings. It's so over because if I'm a superintendent or if I'm a local election clerk, right, and I'm beholden to the machine, the only thing that can be, if I say no to the machine, it's behind closed doors. It's in secret that I'm going to pay the price. And the only thing that could protect me is if there's a massive public outcry.
Yeah,
But that outcry has to endure
yeah.
because the machine will wait. They'll make me pay in 6 months or in a year.
I know it. That's what's happening
And
with
if the
whistleblowers
public
with
stopped
the FBI.
caring, well, who's the
they're
whistleblower
making-
that died? Like he came out. This was a couple weeks ago, and now he's already dead.
Oh, I don't.
I got
know
to look
about
it up.
one.
That was crazy.
Well, and then what's her name?
It was one of the
Tara
FBI
Reid
whistleblowers.
has left the country because she said the Biden people are trying to kill me.
Who?
Tara Reid.
Tara Reid, the one who
says-
accused Biden of
Yeah.
rape, or
Yeah,
sexual
yeah.
assault.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are past an hour.
my
I want to
goodness.
thank everybody for being part. And if this is an interesting conversation to you, share it with somebody. We want to expand the reach. We want to, we don't do this a lot right now. And part of the reason is, if this goes out to a dozen people, that's different than if it goes out to a couple hundred. And we want to have an impact as well. But we want to do it without that manipulative, fear-based, conversation we were having. We want to encourage you and help you. And maybe this is the value we bring to people, is to say, how can you be? I watched a video once on bully proofing. It was this MMA fighter, and he would take these middle schoolers who said, "I'm being bullied at school," and he would teach them how to do jujitsu and how to. Just enough to say you can stand with confidence, that even if they hurt you, you can beat this, because confidence is what resists bullies, right? They're looking for weak. Well, in the same way, what if we could help people resist manipulation, which is its own form of social bullying? That's the value I want to bring.
I'm glad you said that. I want to say a similar thing. I want to make my own plug for the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I think this is true. On second thought, I love the title. I still love it. And what we're really trying to do is say, we're thinking twice about things,
Right.
right? We kind of like to. You and I are both wired
We
that way.
ruminate on it.
And but we now live in a time when it's necessary to think twice, because the first draft is probably deception
Yeah, that's a good
of
way to
many
put it.
things.
Yeah.
Not all, but many.
Almost everything.
Therefore, listen to us think twice. And sometimes it's not even this particular subject, but how we're thinking about it. Why?
Yeah.
What are the little radar blips that made us go, wait, what?
Okay, here's a crazy idea. That keys off of this. The term I got is antiviral.
Antiviral. That's right.
Medicine. Because when things go viral on the internet, it's the impulse to jump on board.
It is.
To participate.
That's right.
And that's what you're describing, is that you're probably getting if something is viral. And a lot of podcasts, it's like, we got to respond today to the latest news. And all the podcast is reacting to what's going on today, and then forget it by next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what we want to be is antiviral and say, no, we want to build a frame of understanding around the world.
Yeah, that's right.
That then you can take your frame and look at whatever's happening and say, I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we're interested in people listening, partly because of the topics, but partly to feel the increasing interest in doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Asking, wait a minute, something seems off here.
Yeah.
And not just let that go, but to think, what is off? What's off?
You know, what'd be fun
I
is
see
to
what's off.
start bringing some examples of those forms of manipulation on the left and the right. Say, oh, you see how he made a good point, but you see how he did it was actually wrong.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the other way too.
Yeah.
How we're getting manipulated on both sides.
Well, I'll give you an example right now of one, because I said it earlier and I was thinking I won't mention it, but Sean Hannity, I don't actually like listening to him anymore.
Yeah, I gave up on him a while ago.
Yes.
He's totally that
The
way.
reason is because it's all intimidation based and fear generated. He's trying to generate fear on the right about what the left is doing, and scorn.
Yeah, scorn and mockery.
That's not a persuasion. That's not. There is a place for it on occasion, but it is not when it's the whole thing. And I found myself, he's not thinking through something and telling me as the audience member what he's thinking and why he's thinking it.
Yeah.
What wrong turn he took, and now he adjusted, and why. So that I'm invited into his process to see if I agree or not.
Right.
Rather, he's laying out, this is what the right needs to believe and make fun of and be ashamed of and be angry at.
Yep.
So join us and be on the right.
And get that feeling.
And get that feeling and be a part of that team.
Yeah.
Well, I might agree with 9 out of the 10 things he said, but that whole process is wrong.
Yeah.
That is a process of the left. That is that intimidation.
Well, and that's why I think it's not unique to the left, but it because corruption can come from the left or the right. And so the mind virus that is maybe wokeness, let's say, the conservative.
So I didn't even get to this. That's what I want to talk about. I've got
We gotta
a
save it, though.
half-page definition of wokeness. I've been working on it.
Okay, but we could talk about that later.
I know.
But what I want to just say, the point I'm trying to make is that there's a viral nature, an insidious nature to the way our culture deals with conflict. And what I want is this podcast to be at least part of that antiviral, resolving things in a way that brings goodness, and not just the corrupt.
Yeah, did you
anger.
choose the word conflict on purpose?
No, I mean,
You said the viral way
Deals
to
with
deal with conflict.
yeah, I mean, politics is conflict. Yeah,
It's interesting. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as ideas.
yeah, but it's
What's
ideas
true
at
and not
war
true.
with one another.
That's true.
Yeah. It's a war of ideas.
All right, sign us off.
We got to go. Something. Share it. We'll see you next time.